Organisation.
Okay, thanks, Kathleen. First of all, good evening or good afternoon, good morning, wherever the viewers might be. So very warm welcome to everyone. Kathleen, I just wanted to mention you're breaking up quite badly, so I didn't really get much of what you said, but I think I got your question. So I'm going to have a go at answering what I think you asked, and hopefully it was the correct question and the right answer, therefore. So yeah, my name is Beattie. I'm the Chief Executive and the founder of Game Rangers International, or GRI. I'm originally from Zimbabwe, born and raised, but left Zimbabwe in 2000 when everything went a bit Pete Tong. I joined the British Army. After the British Army, I got a contract in Cambodia for 2 years, training former Khmer Rouge fighters to become rangers and to integrate with the government-based rangers and gendarmerie, the police. And it was just through a very fortunate or fortuitous friendship that I had with the David Shepherd Wildlife Foundation that I was sent out to Zambia to go and help establish the Elephant Orphanage project in 2008. And so I did that. And then when the David Shepherd Foundation came out to commission the project, a few months later, they basically made me an offer which I couldn't refuse. And that was to take ownership of the project, and they would help me set up Game Rangers International. So that's really how it started. So it started in early 2008. We have our mission is quite simple. It's to empower rangers and local communities to conserve nature. And that's based upon a very simple philosophy that you can't hope to save wildlife and wild spaces until you first save the men and women tasked to protect it, so the rangers, but also the people living closest to those protected areas, the local communities. If you get those two things right, then conservation has a chance of surviving and thriving through the 21st century. So that's how we approach our work. It's all about ranger empowerment and empowering the local communities. We've been operating now for 13 years. And yeah, it's a great thing to be in Zambia. And if any of your viewers haven't been to Zambia, I'd strongly encourage you to consider visiting. It's a lovely country. I think you've spent some time there, Kathleen.
I have, yeah. I lived there for a few years. I mean, is my sound still bad? I just want to double check.
It's better now, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I was very lucky. I lived there for a couple of years and absolutely loved it. It's a beautiful country with some incredible humans as well. So I was very, very fortunate. So kind of going back into what we were talking about, what you do, resource protection, what exactly does that entail and what changes have you seen since it's been in action?
Thanks, Kathleen. So at GRI, we adopt an holistic approach to conservation. We believe that you can't really focus on one element without really getting it right. So I think you mentioned we have a three-pronged approach: resource protection, community outreach, and wildlife rescue. So we empower rangers in all three of those spaces. But in relation to resource protection, we're currently supporting 116 frontline rangers. So the resource protection, those are the guys and girls who are going out and actually securing the protected areas from poachers and the wildlife traffickers, and just making sure that the wild spaces stay intact so that the wildlife can survive and thrive. We support two types of rangers. So you've got the government or the national park rangers, and you've got community rangers, and we just refer to them loosely as rangers. And our job is to make sure that they have everything they need to do their jobs safely, efficiently, and effectively. And to do that, we provide three key ingredients to all the rangers we support in all three of those sectors. And those three key ingredients are the provision of adequate welfare, so making sure that the rangers have got a home to live in, that their kids are going to school, there's a pension plan, they've got some sort of medical insurance if they get injured or get ill. And really what we want is when they step out of the door in the morning and go out to work or on patrol, they're able to concentrate on what's in front of them, because it is a dangerous job. We don't want them worrying about what's maybe happening at home. So that's ranger welfare. The second element, or the second ingredient that's important for rangers to do their jobs properly, is access to good training. So basic training, refresher training, advanced training, and specialized training, all of which is designed to make the rangers more professional and to ensure that they can do their job safely, efficiently, and effectively. And the third and final ingredient that we provide to the resource protection rangers is operational support. And what that really means is providing the rangers with everything they need in terms of communications, logistics, mobility, rations, kit and equipment, technical support, basically, again, everything they need to be able to do their jobs properly. And probably the easiest way to explain to your viewers how it all works is, if you imagine the rangers as a torch, so the rangers are a torch. It's actually a really good torch, but quite often there's no batteries inside. So our job is to be the batteries. We're inside the torch. You don't see us, you don't feel us, but our job is to help make the torch shine brightly. And the great hope is that one day in the future, when developing nation governments have greater resources and access to more funds, and environment becomes more of a priority, they can simply unscrew the back of the torch, shake our batteries out, and put their batteries back inside. And that's what we call ranger empowerment. And it works really well.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And have you seen that by having this initiative, that you've seen a reduction in poaching and those kind of things in Zambia?
Yes, certainly in the areas where we are able to support the rangers, we have seen a big reduction in poaching. But there's many factors involved, many variables. It's quite a complex situation. Often, in fact, most times the local communities living closest to the protected areas, they're living right on the edge of poverty. If there's drought, crops fail, there's no income. So it's actually quite easy for someone living right next to the protected area to be influenced or encouraged or, to succumb to the thought of going poaching. So yeah, whilst we are seeing a reduction in the areas that we're working in, we're very aware that there's still a lot of poaching around, and what it points to is just greater support, trying to expand our model into different areas. But yeah, so on the one, in some places poaching is going down, in other places where there are no rangers and much less resources available to the rangers, we are still seeing high levels of poaching.
Yeah. I guess that kind of feeds into as well with one of your other pillars, which is the community outreach. And for any conservation to succeed, you really do have to have the backing of the community to actually kind of make it become a success. What does your community outreach program entail? And again, what sort of changes have you seen in the country since it's been in place?
Yeah, so again, lots of positive changes where we're able to deliver support. The program itself is split into three key components. So one component focuses very heavily on inspiring the younger generations. So we have education rangers going out on motorbikes to the different schools that are dotted around the protected areas, delivering conservation education material as an after-school activity. It's a very popular program, and we would love to continue expanding that. I think over the years, we've delivered that model to more than 15,000 school kids, some of whom themselves have now joined us as rangers, as fully fledged rangers. So that's a good indicator of success. So inspiring young minds, because the old cliche, the young generation is the future. And if we can help as many kids as possible to really appreciate and understand the value and importance of wildlife conservation, then at least wildlife and wild spaces are in a much better position to survive and thrive through the 21st century. But alongside that, in the community outreach program, it's also about trying to change mindsets of the adults, if you like, much harder, in fact, because that really is influenced by livelihood and their disposable income, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really, in that space, it's more about, trying to help local communities to identify and explore and benefit from alternative income sources. So different farming practices, maybe trying to mitigate human-elephant conflict, which is a big problem for communities living right up against the protected areas. And then the third element is, in each community that we work in, or where we support rangers, because the rangers ultimately come from the local communities. And so we go into those communities and we identify, or the community identify, people with, vulnerable people or special needs and special projects that we're able to then look at how we can best support either those people or those projects. And again, it's a very simple model. It works really well. It's now just a case of seeing how we can expand that into other local communities around the protected areas.
And do you find that,
sorry.
I was going to say, just you kind of mentioned that it is harder with adults to change mindsets. What sort of tactics do you use to try and get them to listen to your side of view as well?
Yeah, you actually said the keyword listen. So one thing we've discovered that works probably the best actually in terms of return on investment and just the sheer reach of it is every week, every Thursday. And so in fact, as I'm talking now, in Zambia right now, there's a radio program that airs every Thursday for 1 hour. It's called Conservation Conversations, and it broadcasts across the whole local community, reaches about 75,000 listeners, and has been voted the most popular radio show 2 years running by the listeners. We have a call-in program, so we have quizzes, and just really trying to engage the listenership and to help raise awareness of the importance and the value of wildlife conservation and what it can mean for local communities. So that's definitely probably our best way that we're able to raise awareness to the adult population. But of course, the younger generations are also listening in, and that's important as well. Excellent.
And then your third program is the wildlife rescue. And I know as part of that is the elephant orphanage that you have. How on earth do you rescue an elephant? They're known for their sheer size, they're highly intelligent animals. It must be an incredible process. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So the Elephant Orphanage Project, which was set up to rescue, rehabilitate, and release back into the wild orphaned elephants, is designed to only provide an intervention when man has been involved. So quite often, as I mentioned, elephant herds will be naughty, I guess, and go into the local communities. They'll crop raid and they'll get chased out. And sometimes, if there's a conflict, the little ones get left behind. Sometimes, if the little ones are lucky, they'll be able to reunite with their herd. But quite often, the herd is 20, 30 kilometers away before they stop, and the little ones can't keep up, and so they get left behind as orphans. We'll watch them for a while, and just depending on their age, because the younger they are, the more quickly they'll succumb to starvation and even to predators. But because it's a human-induced problem, we do get involved. So we only go in and rescue when there's absolutely no other option, or there's just no other way that orphaned elephant is going to survive.
Yeah.
Of course, the other reason why we get orphaned elephants is because of poaching. Quite often, poachers don't really care if they're shooting a male elephant, a bull, or a female. They just want the tusks. And very often, poachers can be quite cowardly, and they'll just spray a herd of elephants with bullets. And so a mother might die. The herd moves on as it should, and the little one, the calf, will usually stay by its mother if it's very young. And in those cases, we come along, we look at the situation, we make a decision. It's a tough decision actually, because we're also accepting a very long-term responsibility. Rescuing an elephant is actually the easier part, the rehabilitation of that young elephant, and then the reintegration of that elephant back into the wild is a very long process. Altogether, you're looking at 10 to 15 years and even more. But just maybe to reinforce how the community outreach program is working and the changes we've seen in relation to wildlife rescue is when we first started, we would receive reports of an orphaned elephant getting left in the community taking it upon themselves, either killing the orphaned elephant or slashing it with a machete or an axe or stones. And, we would have to go and intervene and sort of stop the community from doing that. And then you're left with an injured orphan elephant. But what we've seen over time is through the radio program and through raising awareness, etc., and helping the community really understand the importance and value of wildlife conservation, we actually have the communities now calling us and saying, there's an orphaned elephant, please come and help us to rescue it. And that was demonstrated so beautifully just last week. We undertook our 51st rescue. So we've rescued 51 orphaned elephants over the years. But there was actually 2 orphaned elephants in this case that were left behind because of human-elephant conflict. And it was the local communities who went in, they rescued these orphaned elephants. So by the time we got there with national parks, the elephants were already rescued, if you like. And so it was a great collaboration between the local community, national parks, and Game Rangers International. And I'm very pleased to report that those 2 orphaned elephants, once we rescue them, they get taken to a place called Lalai, which is just outside the capital city, Lusaka. And that's where the little ones get a very high level of care until the age of weaning. And then we translocate those younger ones to Kafue National Park. And that's really where they begin the process of release back into the wild. So the 2 latest arrivals are at Lalai. They're doing well. They've got a couple of small injuries. But the team out there at the moment are just getting their diet correct, because when you rescue these little orphaned elephants, their diet, gets impacted, and we've got to figure out the correct formula to make sure that, we give them as much nourishment as possible. But it's quite amazing, actually, to mention, Kathleen, that within a very short space of time of rescuing an orphaned elephant, they're very forgiving. Within 24 hours, they are suckling from you, from the bottle, of course, but with a human holding the bottle. So even though they can come from very traumatized and conflicted situations, in a very short space of time, you find them bonding with their keepers and becoming part of a new herd.
I think that just shows just how incredible elephants are, really. They're such intelligent, amazing creatures. And I think also what you've just highlighted is perfect for just underscoring that the work you're doing is actually working. That people are trying to now, instead of, as you say, stoning the elephants, they're getting in touch, that people are listening. So you're obviously doing the right thing. And that also kind of feeds nicely into my next question, which was, have you had a defining moment in your career when you're like, this is exactly why I'm doing it? What's the biggest moment for you?
Usually at about 17:30 when the sun goes down. Defining moment where I think, this is why I like doing what I do. An African sunset is very hard to beat. But to really answer your question, I don't think there was ever, there's been thousands of amazing moments, probably tens of thousands actually. So I couldn't really name one precise moment that made me think this is why I'm doing this. But I think, like most people who grew up in Zimbabwe and other parts of Africa, it's all those hundreds of thousands of things you do, as you're growing up, spending time in the wild, fishing, camping, sometimes hunting, or just going out with your parents, into the national parks. It's just this gradual buildup of a love for the wildlife and the wild spaces, and really just trying to make sure that the things that we've enjoyed and, the things we still continue to enjoy will still be there, long after we've gone. That's the main task ahead.
Excellent. And on the flip side of that, what do you find are the biggest challenges in your role, and how do you overcome that?
Yeah, conservation is like I said, it's a very complex space, and it's changed dramatically. Wildlife conservation has changed dramatically, and it will continue to change. We're seeing a lot more technology coming in. Just the fact that we can be having this call, from 2 very different parts of the world, just demonstrates that we are living in an interesting change, I think. But yeah, the challenges, I think the main challenge from an organizational point of view is, we've developed a really good model. The ranger empowerment is working really, really well. And now for us, the challenge is, how do we replicate and expand that outwards? How do we scale what we're doing in Zambia into different protected area spaces? So that's what we are busy figuring out. First, you've got to make sure you've got good management systems, got to have a good team. Really grateful and blessed to say that we have an amazing team. We started with 5 people. We've now got 65 full-time staff. As I mentioned, we're supporting 116 frontline rangers. And so the challenge for us is translating our success and scaling outwards. And I think maybe I can just mention, one of the realizations of that is, all of us conservationists, you want to try and do as much as you can A big realization for me is that the only way we're going to solve this is if we all work together. And so connecting all the conservation groups together, changing us from being atoms into molecules, and creating that covalency between the different conservation groups is one way of scaling outwards and sharing best practices. Because time really is of the essence. There's a lot of success that's being generated in the field of conservation, but there's a stopwatch that's ticking away. And, if we're not careful, if we take our eye off the ball, very quickly, these wildlife spaces can disappear in a heartbeat. And once they're gone, that's going to be really, really hard to get them back.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree that people need to be more really open with sharing how things work as well, and not just keeping it into an organization. So I really think that's great what you're doing as well, is having those conversations, because everyone has their own ways of doing things. They might have tried something and failed, or they tried it and it worked. So if everyone's open, then it's just going to mean things are going to be a lot faster and people can do a lot more good.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I'll be the first person to say that, we were always very, and even now, the nature of the job is you are head down most of the time, concentrating on what's in front of you. And the trick is about creating a bit of bandwidth so that you can look up, try and look over the horizon, look around, see who else is in the landscape doing similar work, and try and reach out to each other. So I think it's something we're all learning. Some are better than others at doing that, but certainly something which GRI is going to make sure that it gets better and better, working together with other conservation partners. And it's not just conservation partners, it's also the organizations working in the local communities, government departments. There's many different players in the conservation space.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay, so I've got one more question to you, and then we will see if I can see we've already got some comments on Facebook, so I'll take a look at those while you're talking. So obviously we can't talk about conservation or anything at the moment without mentioning COVID. You touched on it briefly. How is it impacting your work? And on the flip side, how can people support you during these times?
Yeah, thanks, Kathleen. It's a good question, actually. And I think maybe I'll just start by saying, because the way I'm going to answer it, I just want to make sure that, we do recognize that a lot of people all around the world, families, a lot of people have been impacted really negatively. People have lost their jobs, people have lost loved ones. So we recognize that, we appreciate that. But I have to say that for us, COVID-19 has actually we've been quite lucky, maybe I can put it that way. It hasn't really impacted us per se. Operationally, things are continuing, which is great. Just by the nature of being out in the open spaces, the chances of catching coronavirus are much less, though that shouldn't come across as being flippant. So we've implemented lots of different mitigation measures at all of our project sites. And touch wood, we've had no recorded cases yet. Our funding streams are mostly intact. I think the real challenge for all of us in conservation in relation to COVID-19 is going to be the negative impact that's already happening because of no tourism. A lot of these protected areas rely very heavily on tourism, or the revenue from tourism. So I think from now into next year, and perhaps a little bit beyond, we really need to think about where our funding streams will be coming from. So we're trying to think of new and innovative ways to generate those sources of income for conservation. But I think you asked a question about how can people help. I'll be selfish first, if I may, and just say, in terms of GRI, we just welcome everyone to follow us on our social media platforms, spread the word as widely as you can, not just about GRI, but about all conservation organizations, many, in fact, all of whom are doing great work. So I think the more we can spread the message, and I think this platform you've created, Kathleen, is great. So congratulations and thank you very much. But in terms of the bigger picture for conservation, I think one way in which people can help and actually enjoy themselves in doing so is to really think about when they can take their next holiday. Look at how you can book a holiday, come back to Zambia, go and stay at the lodges, get the economy going. We need to get that wildlife economy going. So if you have a chance and you have the inclination, think about visiting Zambia, think about visiting other countries in Southern Africa. It's an amazing destination. Like Kathleen said at the beginning, amazing people. You won't be disappointed. So thank you.
Okay, so I'm just looking at some of the questions here. A lot of the people are saying that you guys are doing an incredible job, well done. But we've got one question from Douglas Anderson, and he's asking if you do, if you run any human-wildlife conflict research.
Yeah, thanks, Douglas. It's a good question, actually, because it's a critical thing that we have to focus on in modern day conservation, is you've got these human populations that are expanding at an exponential rate, pushing up against the protected areas. And the closer humans and wildlife get, you're always going to have conflict. And unfortunately, the real conflict happens between humans and elephants, of course, also humans and lions. But to answer your question, the short answer is yes. We are conducting human-elephant conflict research. And I'd like to say thank you to the International Elephant Foundation for sponsoring that. But there's so much still to learn. Elephants, like you mentioned, Kathleen, super intelligent animals. What might work today, tomorrow, might not necessarily work as a mitigation measure in 6 months' time, because the elephants are very smart. They can figure things out. So it's a bit of a game at the moment, trying to figure out what works best. So yeah, that's an area that needs a lot more support, a lot more research, and ultimately, it needs solutions, because human populations at this stage are continuing to expand, and so that human-elephant conflict element is unfortunately also going to continue to increase.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's everything that we've got so far, so I'll wrap it up. I want to say a huge thank you, Sport, for taking the time to have a chat with us today, and I hope everyone back home found it as interesting as I did. You're doing some incredible work. You and your team are really making an impact, and I'm very, very pleased that I got to speak with you today. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone, and we hope to hear from you soon.
Thanks, Kathleen, and thank you very much to all your viewers. Stay safe, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you in Zambia sometime soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.